Good evening, friends. I'm Judge Carlos Moore coming to you live from Atlanta, Georgia. This evening, I have an update for you about my thoughts as they relate to the Nolan Wells investigation.
Christine Wansley said it herself, days before she had to bury her own son. Everything is so heavy. I've just been going through the motions. This pain hits different. Welcome to True Crime Case. Quick recap if you're just catching up. 18-year-old Nolan Wells disappeared on July 4th during a boat trip to Horn Island, Mississippi, and was found dead 2 days later. His friends say he chose to stay behind on the island, assuming he'd catch a ride back with someone else. A young woman named Katie, who spent his final confirmed minutes with him, has a different account. Since then, this case has drawn national attention, an FBI statement, viral misinformation, and, this past Monday, Nolan's funeral. Tonight, 4 new things have landed on this case at once, and by the end of this update, you'll know exactly what's confirmed, what's still just a claim, and how far this investigation is from answering the one question that's still open. What happened to Nolan in the gap between that last conversation and the moment he vanished? Christine has kept pushing publicly for answers since the very first days of this case, repeating the same request for photos, videos, and eyewitness accounts from Horn Island almost every time she's spoken to media, as if the answer might still be sitting on someone's phone, unshared. Nolan's father, Elmore Wansley, went back out to the island himself in the earliest hours of the search, before the Coast Guard and Jackson County had fully mobilized. It was Christine who reached out directly to the United Cajun Navy, a volunteer search and rescue group out of Louisiana, to bring in extra resources when the search stretched into a second day. Reverend Al Sharpton, who's since remained closely involved with the family, said early on that he wasn't ruling out race as a factor in how the case was initially being handled, and that key details, in his words, do not make sense. Investigators have said publicly that among the central unanswered questions is why Nolan didn't return with his friend's boat, and why he didn't have his cell phone with him at all. Neither has been explained. Separately, authorities confirmed they were looking into online reports of an alleged altercation on the island that day, and whether Nolan was involved in it in any way. That's part of why investigators have repeatedly asked the public for original, unedited footage from July 4th, rather than relying on whatever version of events was already circulating online. Sheriff John Ledbetter has tried to manage expectations publicly while that work continues. Right now, I know time is of the essence, but folks want answers 10 minutes ago, and unfortunately, that takes time to get the accurate information, he told a local CNN affiliate. It's going to take a lot of hard work. That's part of why investigators have been so specific in what they've asked the public for. Not general tips or theories, but the original, unedited files themselves. Particularly, anything depicting an alleged altercation or anything believed to include Nolan, so that what gets reviewed is the source material, not someone else's retelling of it. For weeks, nobody fully explained why the FBI was involved in this case. This week, they did. The Bureau's Jackson field office released a full statement. It says the FBI has assisted Jackson County using federal tools and partnerships. It says Jackson County is leading this investigation and will keep leading it. Support, not command. That distinction matters. Speculation had already filled the silence. Some assumed the FBI's presence meant the case had quietly escalated into something darker. Others assumed a cover-up. Neither read holds up. Sheriff Ledbetter has said the Wells family deserves a thorough, factual investigation. On July 6th, the day the body was found, he told CNN no foul play had been identified at that point, and that detectives were interviewing people who'd had first-hand interactions with Nolan that day. His office has since interviewed more than 60 witnesses, including the 3 friends who were on the boat with Nolan, and the FBI has specifically been helping examine digital evidence collected during the investigation. The statement also says why federal resources got involved at all: interstate threats. made against people connected to this case, running alongside the family's own independent investigation, not folded into it. A threat becomes federal the moment it crosses state lines, usually through the internet, one person threatening another from a different state entirely. That's exactly what the FBI is built to handle. What the FBI hasn't said is what those threats contained, or who received them. Jackson County Chancery Judge Ashley Cole has. She's the stepmother of one of the 3 friends who were with Nolan that day, and she's confirmed publicly that she received threatening messages, including one referencing a package and violent language. That a sitting judge, someone with her own security awareness and legal standing, felt the need to go public about threats against her family is itself telling. It suggests these threats weren't vague or easily dismissed as internet noise. She'd already deactivated her own Facebook account earlier in the case, after photos of her minor children began circulating online. Trayston Shepard, another friend who was on the island with Nolan, told ABC News he's received threats too. "We did no wrong here," he said. "We're just young adults still learning this whole adulthood thing, and we're being treated like we did something monstrous. Sit with that for a second. Every friend, every witness, every young woman who spent even a few minutes talking to Nolan on that beach is watching this play out in public right now. If speaking up means risking threats serious enough to draw the FBI in, fewer people speak up. That's not just a decency problem, it's an investigation problem, and it raises a question worth holding on to for the rest of this video. If fear is already keeping people quiet, what hasn't come out yet? If you're new here, this is the kind of case we track closely. Every confirmed development, nothing invented. Subscribe now so you catch the next update before it drops. Here's the development that changes this case the most. Katie has finally spoken directly, not through a relative's post online, face to face with Nolan's own mother. For weeks, everything attributed to Katie came secondhand, first from a family friend, then from Katie's own mother and sister, defending her online before she'd said a word publicly herself. That alone tells you what it's cost her just to be near this story. Christine and Katie sat down together, and what Katie told her doesn't match what Christine has been hearing from everyone else. Katie's account has been the same from the start. She and Nolan spent time together that day, then parted ways. She got back on a boat with her own friends. She assumed Nolan was heading back to his, but she never saw him get on that boat. She assumed it, based on what he told her. She didn't witness it. GPS data from Mississippi's Department of Marine Resources, obtained by CBS News, confirms the boat left Horn Island at 4:31 p.m. without Nolan on it. That lines up with what Katie is saying, whatever his stated intention had been. That one detail reframes everything. This isn't Katie's word against the friend's word about something they both saw differently. Nolan told her a plan. Whether he followed it before whatever happened next is something nobody can confirm. Not Katie, not the friends, not the family. An honest assumption and a claim that he stayed can both be true. If something changed in the time between that conversation and what came after, that gap is the real question this case still hasn't answered, and what fills it may not be what anyone expects. There's something else worth noting about the timing of Katie's meeting with Christine. It comes in the same stretch of days as the threats against Judge Cole and Shepard. For the friends who were on that island, the last 2 weeks have meant being publicly scrutinized, privately threatened, and now watching one of their own group's accounts finally reach the family directly, all at once. Whatever comes out of the ongoing investigation, that combination of pressures is already shaping how willing anyone connected to this case will be to speak on the record going forward. If you followed this case from the start, you already know how fast that kind of gap fills with theories that don't hold up. That's why we keep coming back to check what's actually confirmed. If that's useful to you, subscribe so you don't miss it when the next piece lands. While that meeting reshapes the timeline, something darker is unfolding elsewhere. Some reporting describes a more specific, more graphic threat sent to a family connected to one of the boys on that boat. Handle this the way we've handled everything else tonight. The FBI has confirmed threats occurred. It hasn't confirmed the content of any specific threat or named who received it. Until an official source confirms that more detailed reporting, treat it as credible, not settled. Here's what isn't up for debate. Threatening anyone connected to this case is a crime. Grief doesn't excuse it. Suspicion doesn't excuse it. Ben Crump's involvement means the family's independent investigation isn't informal. It's staffed with former law enforcement officers and former federal agents, running in parallel with Jackson County's own effort, not folded into it, and not replacing it. That parallel structure is part of why the phone review, the independent autopsy, and the family's own inquiries all move on separate timelines from the sheriff's department's work, even when they eventually converge on the same questions. Now, the investigation itself. On July 15th, Nolan's parents met with Jackson County District Attorney Angel Myers McElrath. Ben Crump confirmed the case will go to a grand jury once the sheriff's investigation wraps. According to Crump, Nolan's friends took his phone with them when they left the island, and by the time the family got it back, messages had been deleted. That phone will now go through a joint review, family investigators alongside law enforcement. Investigators have also specifically asked the public for original, unedited photos and videos from Horn Island that day, particularly anything showing an alleged altercation or anything believed to include Nolan. Crump has described that altercation directly. Nolan and another person yelling at one another on the boat, caught on another student's recording. Crump has also said he hasn't spoken with the three friends directly, since they've retained their own separate legal representation. The state autopsy was completed July 7th, and the county is still waiting on toxicology results. So is the independent autopsy in Washington, D.C., funded by Colin Kaepernick, which Crump said back on July 11th was expected soon. Not everyone thinks that grand jury referral means much is actually changing. Former Mississippi Judge Carlos Moore has raised concerns about the DA's office, citing a previous case where he says overwhelming evidence still failed to produce an indictment. A referral, he says, isn't proof of progress. Attorney Tyler Bailey disagrees, at least partly, saying a grand jury referral is standard procedure in this county for any death considered unnatural or suspicious, not proof that foul play is confirmed. The only thing that will settle it is what a grand jury actually does with whatever evidence this investigation produces. Before this reaches a grand jury, two earlier claims deserve correcting, since both shaped public opinion before anyone verified them. A photo appearing to show Nolan at a pool party convinced a lot of people he was alive well after July 4th. Rolling Stone checked the metadata. Confirmed by Shepard himself, the photo was taken June 27th. A full week before Nolan ever set foot on Horn Island. A viral video many believed captured Nolan arguing before he disappeared has also been addressed directly. Shepard says repeatedly that the voice on that recording is his, not Nolan's. Both corrections trace back to the same problem. Two pending autopsies have left a vacuum, and unverified claims keep outpacing confirmed ones. Worth remembering with everything covered tonight, including tonight's own new details. That pattern of misinformation outpacing fact has had a real cost, separate from whatever legal outcome this case eventually reaches. Christine has had to publicly correct claims that weren't true, on top of grieving her son, while the family's own legal team spent time debunking a photo and a video instead of purely focusing the investigation forward. Mississippi Governor Tate Reeves addressed the case publicly as well, nearly 2 weeks after Nolan's death, saying he had seen no evidence of foul play at that point, and expressing confidence in local investigators. That comment hasn't settled anything for the family. Christine and Elmore have said repeatedly that they can't fathom why their son would have separated from his friends at all, given how he was raised. That's the same gap the GPS data, Katie's account, and one friend's account of Nolan all circle back to. from 3 completely different directions, without any of them actually closing it. One of those friends, Javon Williams, told CNN he's never known Nolan to stay back while his friends leave. He's always been a guy where if he rode with you, he's going to come back with you, Williams said. That's always how he's been, every single time. Zoom out for a second on something CNN and other outlets have reported directly, not as speculation. Nolan was the only black person in an otherwise white friend group that day, in a town that's nearly 79% white by the latest census. That fact alone has made this case part of a much larger, more public conversation about race, one playing out well beyond the investigation itself. This has been one of the harder cases to watch unfold in real time. If you want to see how it's handled going forward, subscribing is the easiest way to stay with it. This past Monday, July 20th, Nolan's family did something no parent should have to do. The funeral was held at Center Point Church in Ocean Springs, with visitation from 9 to 11 that morning and the service right after. Reverend Al Sharpton officiated, and actor and filmmaker Tyler Perry covered the costs. One detail that's easy to miss: the Mississippi Coast Coliseum and Convention Center's own commission had voted unanimously to offer their venue for the service. The family chose Center Point Church instead, and the Coliseum responded with grace, publicly supporting their decision anyway. That kind of response, a venue turned down and answered with warmth instead of offense, says something about how this community has shown up. Vigils have been held for Nolan across the Gulf Coast since his death, and local businesses, church groups, and Nolan's own community at Southwest Mississippi Community College, where he played wide receiver, organized fundraisers in his name throughout July. After the church service, the family held a celebration of life at the Jackson County Fairgrounds, deliberately separate in tone from the funeral itself, meant to be the kind of gathering Nolan would have actually wanted to be at. Christine had said she wanted that day to celebrate who Nolan was, not just mourn how she lost him. He would not want us sitting around crying, she said, so we're going to have a party to celebrate him. She'd also asked that if there were demonstrations that day, they stay peaceful. Nolan would never want any type of violence, she said. He was not that kind of person. Looking ahead, several things will determine where this case actually goes next. The state autopsy and the independent DC autopsy will eventually produce findings, and whichever lands first is likely to reshape the entire conversation around this case overnight. The joint review of Nolan's phone could either close the gap Katie's account has left open, or deepen it further, depending on what investigators and the family's own team find on it. And however the grand jury referral plays out, that process alone will take time. Most viewers won't see reflected in headlines day to day. None of that changes what's true tonight. Nothing here has been resolved yet. Everything is so heavy, she said, in the days before she had to bury her son. That weight became real this past Monday, in a way no statement, no autopsy, and no grand jury referral could soften. Here's what's confirmed tonight. A federal statement narrowing the threat investigation. A mother and a witness finally speaking directly instead of through everyone else. GPS data placing the boat back at its dock without Nolan on it. A family who has now buried their son while still fighting for the truth about how they lost him. 2 autopsies, still pending. A phone, still waiting on review. A grand jury, still waiting on evidence nobody outside this investigation has seen. This is a true crime documentary about a case that isn't finished, and neither is this family's search for what actually happened to Nolan. And if there's one thing worth carrying out of tonight's update, it's this. Nobody chasing this story, not the family, not their investigators, not us, gets to skip the waiting. The autopsies finish when they finish. The phone review finishes when it finishes. A grand jury moves when the sheriff's department says the investigation is ready. Nolan's family buried him yesterday without any of those answers in hand, and that's the part of this case that's easy to lose track of underneath every new headline. The pain doesn't wait for the paperwork. If you've been with this case from the beginning, what detail tonight changed how you're reading it? Tell us in the comments. We'll keep following this one as it develops.